Welcome to the Wild Physio podcast with your host, Andrew Wild. Today I have Beth Clare on, and Beth Clare is a personal trainer with 8 years experience, and she does a combination of in-person and online coaching. Beth promotes sustainable approaches to nutrition and training, and she specializes in strength training for females, in particular glute development. A huge welcome and thank you to Beth for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah, looking forward to it. And I've been following some of your stuff on Instagram for a fair few years now. And I think I met you briefly at the conference down in Melbourne a couple of years back.
Did you? Do you know what's so funny? Isn't it funny in the fitness industry? There's been so many people that have been like, oh, I think I met you there. Like, I think it's just, it's awesome that we've all kind of come across each other one stage, throughout the years. So yeah, there you go. We there.
Yeah, I was there, the Ultimate Evidence-Based Conference. I literally just said hi to you. You said hi to me, but it's not like we talked or anything like that. Yeah. And then I started following some of your content and I was like, yeah, your content's great. And like you and Brett have obviously reshared a lot of each other's stuff. So you're going really well. Now, obviously you're a bit of an expert when it comes to training women and I love what you're preaching. And also you're a massive proponent of training glutes. Now, what are some of the biggest mistakes women make when it comes to training? Because I know you've talked about it a lot on your Instagram and in the past, how previously you've done bodybuilding and all that sort of stuff. And you focused on things you probably didn't need to focus on, and you've tweaked your training up in the last few years. What do you think are the biggest mistakes people make or women make?
Well, I think, Andrew, the main thing is I think that majority of people assume that quality is going to outweigh quantity when it comes to training. So, you see a lot of these people having specific goals. So I talk a lot about if you have specific goals, you need a specific approach to that goal. So I find a lot of people have specific goals, yet they're doing everything in the opposite of achieving that goal. Like a lot of people doing like group classes or having no, obviously no progressive approach with their training. So they're focusing on the quantity of their training program rather than the quality. Okay, so I think a lot of people neglect taking the time to actually prioritize acing really good technique at all the basic movements, which are going to transfer into one another, and that's what's going to give you the best results. I'm sure you absolutely agree with that. I think that, people are trying to do all these fancy type exercises, combo movements and whatnot, because maybe they saw someone doing it on Instagram or whatnot, and they're not prioritizing just getting really good at the basics. And then obviously once their technique's super on point, someone can actually just simply improve their technique and then progress based off just improved technique. So, and then obviously once you apply overload and whatnot, that's how you're going to get the best results. So I think the major thing is obviously people not prioritizing the basics, not prioritizing good technique, and focusing more so on the quantity rather than the quality. So I used to, I know you brought up these things that I've done in the past. I used to train 6 days a week, heaps of cardio, all this crazy stuff. And I didn't understand how to obviously load my body, especially when it comes to glute training. It's obviously what I'm really passionate about, effectively to be able to also prioritize my recovery. And then obviously if you're recovering some point, your training performance is going to be on point. It's going to drive better progress. So does that kind of answer your question there? What do you think about that?
Yeah, it definitely answers my question. I agree with you. The fact that you need to focus on the fundamentals, and too many people, especially women, think that you need to chop and change your program all the time. You need to chop and change what exercises you're doing all the time. But the reality is the elite athletes that I coach versus the newbies will all be doing similar movement patterns. 100%. But they've obviously progressed a fair bit comparatively to the newbies in terms of the elite athletes. So I talk about it a lot. 80% of most programs are going to be very similar, and the last 20% is going to be based around time availability, injury history, preferences in terms of exercises, and sport goals, aesthetic goals, whatever goals they are. So I think that's really important. I do the same shit over and over and over again, and I have for 10 years. And I don't change things too much. I tweak up rep ranges here and there. I have little specific goals here and there, but you hit the nail on the head. Basics are the king. And what are the basics for the listeners as well?
For the basic movements are obviously going to be like your squat patterns, your lunge when it comes to obviously glutes, I'm going to speak about glutes. Well, overall, squat patterns, obviously your bridge patterns, so like hip thrusts and whatnot, your lunge variations, your hinge movements, obviously your lateral loaded movements. These are all obviously for glutes, and then obviously push-pull for your upper body movements. So, you know, I used to, when I've been a personal trainer for 8 years, I remember, you know, the first couple of years of, oh my God, you'd cringe massively. And like just the way I kind of thought about programming, I used to think about exercises rather than movement patterns. Whereas now I program for movement patterns rather than exercises. So it used to be push-pull. And yeah, it's really funny to look back. I think another point in terms of where people go wrong is a lot of people obviously have body composition goals. Like, let's be real, majority of people who get into like working towards their fitness related goals, a lot of their goals, especially for women, but males as well, have body composition goals. So they're focusing solely on the body composition goal, and, you know, they're not enjoying the process. And, you know, I'm sure, Andrew, you can agree, like the more of an empowering and uplifting experience with your training, and the more you enjoy the way you train, the more consistent you're going to be. And obviously the more you're going to be, you know, driving better results. Consistency is going to drive better results. Consistency is also going to, you know, allow you to improve your technique and then obviously get better results. So if people have this mentality of, I want to look this way, I want to look that way, and just getting into the gym to burn calories and whatnot, because maybe they eat a lot, then they're not going to be able to sustain that long term. And, you know, they're not going to get the results that they want. Another thing is planning for the long term, and, you know, having a long-term mentality. That's something I've had to learn the hard way, obviously being injured now and having multiple injuries throughout my time of lifting. But, you know, training for long-term sustainability, I think, is something that people need to think about, you know, especially when it comes to starting your fitness journey. I think a lot of people think, oh my God, maybe they've got a spike in motivation. Motivation doesn't last. I don't believe in motivation. People get this spike in motivation and they go, yep, I'm going to jump on this 8-week challenge. I'm going to jump on this 6-week challenge. I'm not a fan of challenges, but because of that reason. And then the challenge is over, or, you know, they can't sustain it for a period of time, and then they just revert back to the old ways. Whereas if they just slow down, you know, like what we just spoke about, focus on the basics, you know, focus on improving your technique, apply overload, whatnot, you know, and make sure it's an enjoyable experience, you're going to be able to make progress long term and also sustain your results and also sustain, you know, obviously your training.
Yeah. Oh, look, I completely agree. And yeah, we don't want to rely on motivation because it's a limited resource. You know, you look at New Year's resolutions. You know, a lot of people are super motivated at the start of January, and then that motivation is very fleeting. What we want to try and do is focus on habits. So building that habit in time. And then over time, what you've done is you've just nailed down that habit, and it's something you do every single week. And I often say this, you know, when a client comes and sees me for a one-on-one session, how many times a week will you commit to the gym? And be realistic. Don't stuff me around. Tell me how many times. And they'll be like, oh, look, I'll be honest, 2. Okay, great. Let's go with 2. 2's a hell of a lot better than 4 if you don't commit to 4.
100%. And 2's a lot better if you're actually, you know, having a progressive training program and approach rather than doing 6 sessions with no progressive overload or no progressive approach and completing horrible form and whatnot. 2's way better.
Yeah, agreed. Completely agree. And a lot of the glute group girls that I have here that I train, like they peel back from doing, say, F45 4 to 5 times a week, and they come and do 2 really well programmed sessions with me. Yep. They walk a little bit more. I teach them about nutrition, and then that's where all the magic happens.
100%.
So yeah, no, I completely agree.
I just had my client, Yasmin, last night in my glute academy. It's cool that we both have our glute classes. She started weight training over 2 years ago with me. She'd never had any barbell experience before. She'd never done any strength training before. And she had, like, when she first started deadlifting, she struggled to do 30 kilos and she was so nervous to do it. Last night, I just got goosebumps because I get so excited about my girls. She deadlifted 115 kilograms for like a 1 rep max. And she was just so happy about it. It was just like, and she only trains 2 days a week. for
And
2 years.
this is such a good segue as well to my next question about people, and especially women, focusing on getting strong and performance goals in the gym rather than just always focusing on that aesthetics. Because if you nail a little bit more if you nail your nutrition outside of the gym, and then in the gym you're focusing on the performance, you're getting stronger over time, applying progressive overload, well, the aesthetics are going to happen anyway, and you're going to reach your body composition goals in time. So
Yes.
why should women be focusing on getting strong?
This is such a great question, and it's one of my favorite ones to answer. Like, I obviously have such a passion for strength and conditioning for females. I believe that working towards, like I said before, everyone wants to look good, everyone wants to feel good, everyone wants to grow big glutes and feel like hot with it themselves. But why not have the approach be like more uplifting and empowering? Like, you know, I've gone through stages earlier on in obviously my training where I've, you know, gone to the gym and like focusing on what I look like. It's not uplifting, it's not empowering. So, you know, first of all, I think that it's going to come down to having your approach be something that's uplifting, empowering, and enjoyable. So then therefore the consistency component is taken care of. Okay. You're always getting to the gym, focusing on, oh my God, I want to look better like this, or just focusing on things that you want to improve yourself. You know, it's going to take away from the intensity and obviously the effort you can put into your training. So obviously strength training for females is great in terms of that component as well. Obviously, if you want to like improve your body composition, which again is majority of the goals that females have, along with strength related goals, you have to get strong to do that. You have to get strong. And, you know, I always say being strong is cool and it's empowering, and, you know, it's challenging. And, you know, I think that confidence as well comes into play with things. I talk about confidence in heaps of different aspects, and obviously, you know, getting more confident with your strength training and having the confidence to, you know what, I'm going to put more weight in the bar. Like Yasmin last night, she never would have even tried 115 kilograms a year ago. Her confidence still wasn't as good, but that then positively transfers into other areas of life, I do believe. So if you you know, your training is obviously empowering, you're challenging yourself, and your confidence is improving within your training, I do believe that positively transfers into other areas of confidence in your life. So I think that's another really great point to add in terms of why I really love strength training for women. As well, it's a sense of community, I think, as well. Like, everyone loves to be strong, and I think it's cool like that women want to be strong now. And whereas years ago, you know, I think it's even kind of recent, more, you know, strength training being more popularized for women. Like, I think it's just a great shift. And I just think that, you know, benefits for everything, you know, confidence, obviously it's going to be more empowering. So you can obviously be consistent with it, get better results then, and obviously improve your body composition all along the way.
Yeah, for sure. And two side notes as well, especially for women, is maintaining muscle mass and bone mineral density throughout your life is so important. And if you lift weights, you're going to achieve the maintenance of the muscle mass and maintenance of bone mineral density going forward, because you want to hold on to that as much as possible. And things like running are not stimulative enough for the bone long term for you to increase or maintain your bone mineral density. Hence why you need to load it in a fashion that's going to be stimulative, which is the strength training, jumping, that sort of stuff.
Loads more benefits, absolutely.
What was that, sorry?
There's loads of benefits.
Oh, so many benefits. Now, obviously you love training glutes. I've seen your post before. You've done a post where you compared your pre-glute focused training to now, and the change is huge, and you've done really, really well with it. What changed? What needed to change? And what exercises did you start to incorporate more of?
Okay, so is this the recent post that I did? It was probably like last week or so?
I think so, yeah. I think it was like 2016 or 17, and then like compared to now. Yeah. I think it was the one that Brett reshared.
Yeah. So the first point is I've actually been, as you know, Andrew, I've been injured for almost 2 years now. So obviously there's a little bit of that kind of adds into it, with the last year or so not being able to do many squat patterns because I've got abdominal tendonitis. So my training has had to change dramatically out of kind of what I want to be doing. But from my previous style of training, which was, 2017 and backwards of that, I used to do a lot of, I didn't understand obviously Brett's rule of thirds methods, which is obviously if you're wanting to maximize your glute strength and development, you're going to want to be obviously loading your glutes in all the main areas.
Can we go into that quickly?
Yep. So you're going to be doing obviously horizontal. So it's going to be like obviously hip thrust and whatnot, your vertical loaded movements, so your squat patterns, even vertical pull, deadlift and whatnot. And then obviously lateral loaded movements, so your abduction type work, just to kind of summarize it.
Yep.
So I used to do loads of, and I actually did a graph on this post. I don't know if you swiped across, and I did actually showcase the different sets overall in the week, because I was so interested. I just came across the photo. I was like, oh my God, I wanted to see how much quads I had lost in comparison to the photos. So anyway, so previously, before I started getting really obviously obsessed with growing my glutes, I used to do loads of vertical loaded movements. I looked back at my training program. I'll send it to you after, Andrew, because you'll probably just find it interesting to look at. It actually was programmed by someone else at the time. And it was loads of squat patterns, like crazy squat patterns. Like I was doing squats and leg press, lunging, leg extensions, all these crazy stuff. I was doing I think it was like maybe 3 or 4 sets of like hip thrusts in that week, no lateral loaded glute movements. And back then I was squatting twice a week, like back squats, but recovering was so bad. Like I wish I had my kind of brain that I have now in terms of not pushing through, because my recovery was so bad, because obviously I was overloading squat pattern crazily. So I had quite big quads. For those who've seen the photos, my quads are actually jacked, but I had decent glute genetics, but I had like glutes, but nowhere near as much as obviously they have grown over the years since I've obviously changed my glute training methods. So pretty much how I've changed the way that I train to obviously maximize my glute development over the years is, first of all, prioritizing my training performance and recovery has been major for me. So I had a really good chat with Brett actually at that conference that we're both at. And I said to him, I've always been told to do squats twice a week, this, that, like, I don't think I should be doing them. Like, I prefer to do hip thrusts. And I remember he said to me, like, what is the point of doing something that you're not recovering from and that's stalling your progress in your other movements? And I was like, yes, it's like that little spark that was like, it kind of made sense to me. And I was like, okay, perfect. Since then I've had a really big focus on ensuring my training programs have been specific to the way that I personally recover. Everyone is different. Like I said, I don't recover that well from doing squats. So I backed off a little bit on my squats. Obviously, I hip thrust 3 days a week and added in quite a lot of lateral loaded movements, which I never did previously. So I was, doing like at least 12 plus sets of hip thrusts per week and like a lot of lateral loaded movements, as well as obviously the main movements. Like I was still doing deadlifts, or still doing squats, but just not as high frequency, and doing lunge variations, doing hinge variations, still doing everything. I just obviously made sure my training program was more evenly balanced and more specific to glutes. So I think that's where a lot of people go wrong with glute training. They have the goal, but their training program isn't specific to that. Yeah. So and obviously the difference has also been a little bit to do with obviously me not being able to do many squats or lunges and whatnot since being injured, but I've still been able to maintain my glutes since then, from obviously still doing hip thrusts 2 to 3 days a week and still doing my additional lateral loaded movements and hinge movements as well.
Yeah, great. It definitely sounds like you've just tweaked things up and you're doing more hip thrust, more lateral movements, a little bit more hinging, a little bit less squatting, but you're still doing the fundamentals. But you've just
still always change the variations because of my injury. So obviously now I'm still doing a squat pattern, but I'm doing a box squat because it's not appropriate for me at the moment whilst doing my rehab to be doing a full range squat.
Very well answered. I like it. Now, this is a good segue into this. So there was this study that came out this year by Barbalho et al. In 2020. Now, it was a study done on female well-trained athletes. It was in Brazil, and they compared hip thrust to deep squats, and they checked the ultrasound thickness of the muscle through, it was glute max, and it was also mid thigh. And it was shown that squats actually doubled glute
Yeah.
growth than hip thrusts, and there was 6 times quad growth with squats compared to hip thrusts.
Yeah.
Now, Brett copped an absolute hiding for this by a lot of people, and I think it was unwarranted. I think let's dive into this because this is a big topic I wanted to discuss. Just to note as well for the people out there listening, the squats performed in this study were deep squats to 140 degrees roughly, which is quite a deep squat. It's definitely not a box squat. It's definitely not a parallel squat. It's quite a deep squat. And that is food for thought because the glutes are on stretch at the bottom of the squat. What are your thoughts on the study? Because I have plenty of thoughts myself.
Yeah. All right. So first of all, my opinion is obviously based on my own practical experience and personal experience, obviously with my own training, my own progress, and also training a lot of clients. So like I said, my opinion is based on my own experience with obviously squats and hip thrusts. So my first kind of opinion on it is do both. Like if you want to be obviously maximizing your glute strength and development, you need to be doing a squat pattern, you need to be doing a hip thrust pattern. Okay. So, and like what we just quickly touched on, there's always going to be a variation of a squat pattern, and there's always going to be a variation of a bridge pattern that will suit each individual. Okay. You know, like I just said, I at the moment can't do a full range squat, but I can still do a box squat. So I'm still going to be able, obviously it's not going to be as effective because I'm not going all the way down, obviously for your glutes, but I think that, you know, we should be doing both. Okay. So that's the first thing I kind of think about it. And I think in terms of the backlash that Brett got from it, I think the people took it on like Brett was kind of do hip thrust type thing. Brett is all for doing squats.
Exactly.
Brett is all for doing, and I will like anyone that kind of, I don't know. I think that a lot of jealousy comes with Brett's popular, like how popular Brett is because of hip thrust. A lot of people try to bash him for that, and I really don't like that. But Brett is all for all the main lifts. So Brett is all for squats. If you watch his girls, they're squatting twice a week, they're hip thrusting 3 days a week. So I think do both. Another thing is like the recovery component when it comes to squats versus hip thrusts. Like I said, Andrew, I don't personally, and this is going to be super individual, I personally don't recover that well from doing squats. And if I were to do squats twice a week, the rest of my training program and the rest of my training performance through the week wouldn't be very great because obviously I'd be still trying to recover from doing those squats. And, you know, a lot of people nowadays are working 9 to 5, they're sitting down, they're shorter hip flexors and whatnot, and they've got quite tight hips. So, you know, I think that in terms of the recovery, in terms of for like frequency and whatnot, like I've never done hip thrusts and been like, oh my God, the next day, like I can't actually walk, or I'm in so much hip pain from doing hip thrusts. So obviously, therefore, you can increase the frequency which you train, obviously, glutes. If you're training, that's going to be in a way which you can recover from. And that's how I've shifted my training. So I can obviously, therefore, make progress over time and not be stalling my progress. So hip thrusts, I've never once heard anyone say they can't walk the next day from doing them. So therefore, you can increase the frequency in which you do them. It also, like, again, I like to talk about the confidence component. I have a big passion for taking people with no experience and making them feel confident with their training. And I think that most people can do hip thrusts with really good technique. It's really hard to stuff up a hip thrust. Like once you learn the fundamentals of the movement pattern, it's very hard to stuff it up. Okay. It's very also hard to get injured from doing it. So therefore, women who want to get strong, they can hip thrust heavy. Like my girls feel so like badass in the gym when they're hip thrusting so heavy, and that boosts their confidence with the overall strength and conditioning training program. Whereas with squats, I'm nervous to do a back squat. When even having the bar doing box squats for the first time in ages, I was like, oh my God, this is actually pretty nerve-wracking having a barbell on my back. And take a beginner, yes, there's heaps of other variations for squat patterns, which they can do quite well. But doing a barbell back squat, I find majority of people are quite nervous to do it, first of all. So, you know, confidence is a big thing. And I think that people can do hip thrusts with really good technique. It's going to definitely reduce the risk of injury. And it's going to boost their confidence, which will transfer into obviously the rest of their training program. So that's what like my opinion is on, is it like, I personally can do more hip thrusts than I can do squats. So that's why I will favor hip thrusts over squats. And I'm not like, I love squats. I wish I could recover from them. But personally for me, I've seen more progress since prioritizing hip thrusts over squats. But I always think do both.
Yeah, I think so too. You need to be doing both. You don't have to do both, but I agree if the program's well-rounded, you should be doing something that's a hip thrust pattern, something that's a squat pattern. The reason why the hip thrust pattern, the peak tension's at the top when the glutes are in a shortened position, and then when you're into more of a squat pattern, you're getting peak tension at the bottom in terms of the glutes when they're in a stretch position. So it makes sense to hit both. Food for thought as well. We talked about in that study, the Barbalho study, that they did the deep squats. So to maximize your glute development, if you're trying to do squats, you'd ideally want to get the depth. Now, if you can't get the depth, because a lot of people can't get the depth because of ankle mobility or previous history of injury or whatever it is, lifting your heels up is a really, really effective way of being able to go deeper. So lifting the heels up with e.g. a wedge, a weight plate, or weightlifting shoes, you'll be able to get more depth typically. Another way you can do it in terms of getting depth is go to something that's front loaded, e.g. a T-bell, which is a really, really good way of doing it. A T-bell in between two boxes, something like that. So you can get more depth as well. Depth is really, really important. And I think that that's a huge part of why they grew a lot in these studies, because they were doing the depth.
Andrew.
Yeah. And one more thing as well. So I think, as I was saying, they need to be complementary. So the stretch versus the shortened position. You hit the nail on the head with the hip thrust thing. So hip thrusts, because women can do heavy weight really quickly, it often builds confidence. I agree that a lot of people have a lot of anxiety about back squats, purely because it feels a little bit more unsafe, because you've got a bar on your back. Once you get down to the bottom of the squat, you've got to get back up, don't you? With a hip thrust, if you can't get the bar up, you just can't get it back up. And then if you get to the top and you break, you don't hit full extension, well, the bar just goes straight back down. So the range of motion is actually less in terms of a hip thrust. So yes, I agree, less central nervous system fatigue, purely because it's less multi-joint. It's more of an isolation movement. I agree with that. This is the other point why I love hip thrusts. And this is really important for people to understand when they're like in the camp of squat versus hip thrust. With women, there's an upper body limitation with deadlifts, squats, RDLs, those type of movements. Women aren't as strong with their upper body as they are with their lower body.
Yeah.
So if you're holding a bar, what was that?
Love that for us.
Yeah. Like, of course, you're going to probably be able to lift more with the hip thrust, because it effectively takes the upper body out of the equation, because you're literally just balancing the weight with your hands, and that's about it. It's primarily a lower body lift, as opposed to a squat. A squat, you've got to hold the bar on your back. Often women don't have a lot of muscle mass at the top of their shoulders, so it's sitting a little bit uncomfortably on their back because it's on less muscle than a guy. So you're taking the upper body out of it. So that's another reason why hip thrust is so effective.
Also, you've got to know how to brace effectively. Majority of people don't know how to brace effectively. And obviously that's going to assist with your technique. So squats are so much more technical than doing the hip thrusts.
Yeah, I completely agree. And previous research that's been done on the hip thrust has typically been EMG studies. Now, if we look at the research with how muscle grows, it typically is going to grow via mechanical tension. Now, EMG is only showing us the activation. It's not showing us the mechanical tension. This is another really good and really important point. So just because it has a high activation on EMG does not necessarily mean it correlates to muscular growth going forward and more mechanical tension. The reason why it often gets a big EMG reading is because at the top of a hip thrust, it's at peak tension when the glutes are shortened. So the EMG reading is going to be off the charts. So hip thrusts do well with EMG readings. So that's why previously, before this Barbalho study, there's been multiple studies saying that hip thrusts outperform other movement patterns like squats with EMG, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to better it in terms of muscular growth. So look, you can dive into this research a hell of a lot, but I think people are way too black and white with it. It's like, should you do squats? Should you do hip thrusts? I'm like, well, fuck that. Just do both. Like, stop having this argument about which one's better when it makes sense to do both.
100%, especially if you're wanting to grow glutes, you need to do both.
100%.
Like, yeah.
Do you do much single leg work?
Me, literally, most things I'm doing at the moment is stability stuff. You would be very happy about that, Andrew, because obviously I'm recovering from my abdominal tendonitis. So I am making up for a lot of lack of stability, what would you say, prioritizing in my early days. And I like to use myself as an example to teach others. So yeah, I think definitely years ago when I first started lifting, I was super like, yeah, like do this, do that, and just didn't prioritize getting stronger, obviously unilaterally and focusing on my stability. And now I'm catching up.
Yeah, great. And it's so important to do stuff on single leg. 80% of the time we're walking, we're on one leg, and 100% of the time when you're running, you're on one leg. So doing one-legged stuff is really important. And just food for thought as well, not a dig at you at all, Beth, but tendonitis really is a really poor word. I hate it because the tendon-based issues, it's more of a tendinopathy because we know with the science, we know with the science, it's more of an opathy, based on the fact that it's not really inflammation that's happening in terms of the tendon.
That's what was diagnosed.
So yeah,
do I say that?
Yeah, it might have said it on the report, but I still don't like it. Just food for thought.
I say on the report it says tendinopathy, but I say tendonitis because no one, I don't know, people can kind of relate to a bit more.
I agree with that they can relate to it a bit more, but I try and make sure that the terminology is right no matter what. But I need to do a podcast on this, on tendons, which is something that I'll do soon.
Listen to it.
Sounds good. Now, I really like that discussion on the hip thrust versus the squats, and I agree, do both. If you can't...
Be open-minded. It's what I say, and this is what Brett preaches too, and everyone's bashing Brett. Brett's so open-minded as a coach, and I've learned that a lot from him. Brett's been kind of like an unofficial mentor to me over the years, and I've taken a lot of things that he's kind of taught me and obviously spoken about. But be open-minded. Like if you're going to be closed-minded, you're going to close off potential progress and potential, obviously, maybe change of mind. So if these people are going, yes, squats over hip thrust, have you done a hip thrust? Have you done banded work? No, you haven't. So how can you comment on it?
Yeah, I agree. And every coach, you got to be in the trenches doing these lifts yourself to figure out what works and what it feels like. It's so important.
Don't know, say I haven't done it, so I can't have an opinion on it. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, agreed. And just food for thought, we also discussed before the fact that we talk about movement patterns. You don't have to back squat. You could goblet squat, you could split squat, you could leg press, you could hack squat. These are all movement patterns. And if you look at machines have often got a really bad rep over the years, but if you look at machines versus free weights are no better in terms of muscular growth, in terms of all the research. So if you like machines, go for it. I have zero problem with you using machines.
That means you're going to be confident to do that, and then therefore you're going to be consistent with your training program. That's better than being too nervous to do a squat and skipping out on it. Exactly. That's something I speak about as well in terms of the confidence aspect. If you're a beginner and you want to stick to machines so you can apply, obviously, you can complete all the movement patterns on machines to begin with, so it gets you in the gym, do that. Yeah. And then progress.
Yeah, for sure. And something like a hack squat. I love hack squats. I wish I had a hack squat on the balcony. That'd be really nice. The depth you can get.
A balcony gym as well.
Well, yeah, I'll have to send you a video after this, and I'll show you. I've got a full setup. And
balcony gym too with the hip thruster.
Yeah, you'll probably be shocked with how much stuff I've got on mine. But I'd love a hack squat purely because you can get such great depth, and that quad load is great. So I wish I did have it, but they're bloody expensive and they're heavy as well. So
belt squat lately, I've been tolerating a belt squat really well.
Nice. Do you have a hack squat?
I'm not too confident to do that at the moment with the injury, like in terms of pain, but I don't know, belt squat's been pretty good, but hack squat, brutal.
Yeah, for sure. Last question, Beth. Why will you never compete in bodybuilding or bikini competitions ever again? I've heard you say this.
Yes, I've definitely said that. And I do like to speak up about it because I feel like a lot of people who have competed before aren't speaking kind of like the truth about it, or not the truth about it, but they're not being real about it. And then what happens is, like, as you can probably tell, I'm really into like empowering people and teaching people and keeping it real and giving people confidence. And people are looking at people who've done competing and think, oh, I want to do that. And throwing themselves into it because some coach wants their money and says, oh, you could compete. Come on me, like come and train with me and compete. But they don't understand what like the toll it takes on your body to actually go through a prep. So just quickly, I started competing at the age of 20, and I stopped last year, obviously. March last year, 2019 was my last comp and ever comp. So I did 4 seasons, 8 comps in my time competing. First of all, like I personally actually have learned a lot from competing, and I come from a very sporting background. So that's why it kind of, I was kind of interested to do it. And I'm very grateful that I can immediately say that I always had a pretty positive experience with it in terms of like mindset and relationship with food and whatnot, majority of the time. So I learn a lot, obviously, as a coach. It's kind of like your own, if you've got that mentality, it's kind of like my own kind of scientific experience or experiment the last 2 comps, but it's not realistic. It's not sustainable, obviously. There's people that go out there and say competing's a lifestyle. I'm sorry, but it's definitely not a lifestyle. And that's why I don't really post that many photos of like my comps anymore. I don't want people to it's not that I don't want people to know that I've done that, but I just prefer to preach lifestyle to people and promote that, you know, obviously sustainable approaches is going to be way better after than just trying to do a comp and then just being stuffed up from it after. So anyways, the reasons why I will not compete again is it's not healthy for your body. Like I have dealt with hypothalamic amenorrhea for pretty much all my life up until probably the last year where I've had my first ever year. I'm 27, Andrew, but my first ever year of mostly, so I say mostly, whereas it still hasn't been 100%, but mostly regular menstrual cycle. So that is massive progress to me alone. But, you know, losing, like, why would you force yourself to lose your period essentially? Like, do you know what I mean? I look back at it now, like I knew that I would lose my period like multiple times, especially in the earlier years. I knew what I was getting into in terms of, you know, not getting my period, but I didn't understand why it was happening and why it's not healthy to do that. You know, getting your monthly, you know, menstrual cycle is like your monthly health check. It's something that's meant to happen, and that's not happening, and you're doing that to yourself. So that's a massive component as to why I will not compete again. And a lot of people don't realize that with hypothalamic amenorrhea. So for those listening, hypothalamic amenorrhea is a loss of your menstrual cycle. And it's not just, it's basically, I would say there's like a lot of different components that will contribute to someone getting hypothalamic amenorrhea. Obviously the stress component is massive. So stress psychologically and obviously through exercise is a major component of hypothalamic amenorrhea. And for me personally, the stress component with exercise was a major contributor to me.
And the low body fat.
Energy availability. So yes. Obviously low body fat and energy availability. So if you're training excessively and you're not giving your body enough energy, it tries to obviously, you know, save energy from sources that it can. And obviously the reproductive system isn't and needs to be in terms of survival. So it stops all things related to that, unfortunately. So it's actually a really scary thing to go through. Like, I don't think women talk about it enough, but I want to have kids one day. Like, I'm getting goosebumps now speaking about it. Like, imagine if I couldn't have kids and look back and going, oh, okay, because I did all that, I would never forgive myself. So, and that's what I was getting at is with HA, so hypothalamic amenorrhea, not getting your period is the physical, obviously, symptom of it, but there's so many other symptoms that girls don't talk about. You spoke about earlier, the bone mineral density with strength training. Not getting your menstrual cycle is not good for obviously your bone mineral density.
Well, so, it can actually, if you get amenorrhea and you don't get your period for a period of time, you can actually, no pun intended. It can actually cause irreversible bone mineral density loss.
Absolutely. Yeah. I've had to test mine to make sure I'm on point because I've had my period probably half the time I should have had it. As well, obviously there's so many other contributors to HA, which people don't talk about. or know about. They just think, oh, you don't get your period. Like, I'm crazy. I reckon I've got ADD or something or other. My energy, if someone videoed me throughout the day, I'm literally crazy. Like, I just can't sit still. But when I'm dealing with HA, I'm like this.
Yeah, you're going to try and conserve energy, and people have got to think about competing like controlled famine. You're literally dieting to the point where you're so low in terms of body fat that your body's trying to conserve as much energy as possible because it just doesn't want to die.
Exactly right.
So it's literally controlled famine, and it's just so unwise. I think it can lead to a lot of issues, including amenorrhea, including eating disorders, binging, that type of stuff. You know, at the end of a block of training, just prior to obviously going to compete, women will often lose their period. They'll get the amenorrhea, they're low libido. Guys, say for instance, they got like zero libido, they can't even get an erection, things like that. So it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And this is why I think we should focus more on building performance goals and building people up in terms of getting strong, and stop worrying about being at a certain body fat percentage and being super ripped. It's just not.
It's not fun. I've been so lean like so many times, and it is not fun at all. I like to have a social life. I don't have a social life at all when I'm competing because I can't do it because I've got to, you know, I can, but it's not fun because you're not present because you're thinking about what you've got to do. You're super food focused. And like you said, competing, you are literally doing eating disordered behaviors. I don't care what anyone thinks, but you are doing controlled eating disordered behaviors. And that's just the fact of the matter. People don't understand what they're going into, and then they wonder why they struggle afterwards.
Yes, exactly. And as you said, it's like the whole claim that it's a lifestyle. That's bullshit. That ain't a lifestyle. That ain't a life either. You know, there's more to life than that. And a lot of them have gotten to the point where that's all they think is important. Like, that is not, exactly. That is not fitness.
I did a post about this. I'm like, literally using myself as an example. This isn't fitness. And I've won, like, I've placed in most competitions. This is fitness. People working on their goals. And that's what I'm really annoyed about competing. That's why I don't want to be a part of that community, Andrew, anymore, because I don't want to, I don't know. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't want to be a part of that community anymore because I feel like it gives a different idea of what fitness is. And that's not what it's about. Like, by all means, like, if I know I still have friends that compete, like, that's awesome. You do you, but speak about what goes on behind closed doors when you're competing, and don't like,
don't just see the photo, because the thing is, a lot of people just look at the photo at the end and being like, oh, that'd be great. I want to look like that. And they don't understand the shit that person's been through to get there. Oh my God. And the lack of energy, they've lost their period. They've got no libido. Their training's been shit. They're not even lifting that much anymore purely because they're so low in terms of energy availability. Like, it blows my mind that people want to do that. Look, whatever, go for it if you want to. But at the same time, I think that the shift that's been made in the last 5 to 10 years with women training a lot more in the gym and building muscle is exactly what we need. And like the focus on building a big butt and stuff like that, go for it. We love that. You know, that's so much better than getting completely shredded, ready for stage.
I agree. And I think that as well, in terms of the stage photos, I did a post about this as well. If you see me before I compete, to me on the stage, 2 different people. I look disgusting. Like, I am like a string bean. I'm only little anyway. I'm like a string bean. Like 49 kilos I was in my last comp. Crazy. So people also look at the stage photos and don't realize that's not actually how they look like, because there's been a process to get there. But I think as well, what you said, Andrew, I think we're getting to a stage of getting a bit more of a positive shift in the industry in terms of like, this is my word that I've came up with, thick fit. So like girls are wanting to like have big butts and like be a little bit thicker and be strong. And like, I feel like hopefully things keep progressing in that way and people aren't too into the whole, like, you know, restrict your lifestyle just to look a certain way. Like, yeah, I'm hoping that's the case. And I think that, you know, in terms of hip thrusting and the whole glute drive, like obviously we've got Brett Contreras to thank a lot for that, for obviously popularizing that type of training. But I do think there is a bit of a positive shift now, and I'm really hoping it continues that way, because yeah, like I enjoy doing the comps, but is it realistic for my health status? No. Is it realistic for me to maintain my social life? No. Is it good on my body? No. I'm injured now.
Yeah.
Why? Because I did training, I overloaded way too much, and obviously energy availability wasn't where it needed to be. Amenorrhea as well. There you go.
For sure. Yeah, I completely agree. And it's all about a balance. It's all about sustainability and having fitness fit around your lifestyle. It shouldn't be 100% your lifestyle, and every part of your life is just geared at getting super lean. So find a balance, find something that's sustainable, and go from there. Now, Beth, thank you so much for coming on. It's been so
Thanks
much
for having
fun. Where can all the listeners find you?
So you can find me on the gram, which is just Beth Clare Fitness. And then everything's just pretty much in a link tree now. So my websites are in the link tree. And then I've got my own podcast as well, which is Beth Clare Fitness, the podcast. But yeah, just pretty much Instagram nowadays has got it all.
Yeah, seriously. Link trees are great. This podcast is on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts. Any last words or words of wisdom for the women out there, Beth?
I would just say train smarter, train hard as well, and train for the long term and educate yourself. I could just keep going really, but yeah, I just think that don't overthink it. Don't overcomplicate your training. Make sure you enjoy it. Make sure you're learning from it. And make sure you're obviously, doing the right things that are specific to your goals.
Agreed. Do the fundamentals and do each set like it's the last set you'll ever do, and do less sets. I think that's another thing.
And one more thing, Andrew, aim to be thick, fit, not shredded.
Hashtag thick fit. Love it. Thanks again, Beth.
Thank you so much.
We'll do it again soon. And as usual, stay strong.